Lena Carter moved to the quiet suburb of Willow Lane with her 10-year-old daughter, Sophie, and their therapy cat, Whiskers. The trio had fled the city after a devastating apartment fire left Sophie with severe anxiety and night terrors. Whiskers, a calm Maine Coon with a therapeutic presence, had been Sophie's anchor through months of recovery. Their new home, a cozy blue bungalow with a sprawling backyard, was supposed to be their sanctuary. The neighborhood, governed by the Willow Lane Homeowners Association, HOA, boasted tree-lined streets, friendly block parties, and a sense of community Lena had longed for. But their peace shattered the moment they met Diane Holloway. Diane, the HOA's VYC president, was a woman who wore her authority like a crown. Her perfectly manicured nails tapped impatiently on clipboards, and her sharp eyes missed nothing. The first time she saw Whiskers lounging on the porch, her lips curled in distaste. "That cat isn't on the approved pets list," Diane declared, appearing out of nowhere as Lena unloaded groceries. Lena forced a smile. "Whiskers is a registered emotional support animal. Here's his certification." Diane barely glanced at the paperwork. HOA rules require all animals to be pre-approved. "We'll need a formal REAL. Lena submitted the forms, thinking it was just bureaucracy. She was wrong. The harassment began subtly. A citation for excessive noise when Whiskers hadn't made a sound. A fine for property damage after Diane claimed Whiskers had dug up her prized roses despite the cat never VYing the house. Then came the anonymous complaints. Whiskers was a nuisance, a threat, even though he spent his days curled beside Sophie, purring softly as she read. Lena fought back. She installed cameras, documented every interaction, and even rallied a few neighbors to vouch for Whiskers' gentle nature. But Diane's influence ran deep. The HOA board, intimidated by her, dismissed Lena's appeals. Then, one evening, Sophie burst into tears. "Why does that lady hate Whiskers?" she asked, clutching the cat tightly. Lena's heart ached. Some people just like control, sweetheart. But control wasn't enough for Diane. The attack happened on a Tuesday. Sophie was in the backyard, laughing as Whiskers chased a butterfly. Lena was inside, baking cookies, when she heard the scream. She sprinted outside to find Whiskers limp on the grass, a dart protruding from his side. Diane stood on her porch, a tranquilizer gun in hand, her expression cold. "He was trespassing," she said calmly. Lena's VY shone blurred with rage. Whiskers hadn't left their yard, the cameras proved it. But Diane had already called animal control, spinning a story about an aggressive cat. The emergency vet saved Whiskers, but the damage was done. Sophie's night terrors returned full force. And Lena? She was done playing nice. Enter Jesse Morales, a fiery attorney who specialized in suing power-tripping HOAs. Within days, Jesse filed lawsuits against Diane and the HOA for violating the Fair Housing Act, emotional distress, and animal cruelty. The neighborhood fractured. Some residents, tired of Diane's tyranny, came forward with stories of her bullying. Others, afraid of retaliation, stayed silent. Then came the smoking gun, security footage from a neighbor's camera. It showed Diane loading the tranquilizer gun before Whiskers had even stepped outside. She planned it. The lawsuit went viral. News outlets picked up the story of the HOA queen who shot a therapy cat. Donations poured in for Sophie's therapy fund. Strangers sent letters, toys, and even a handmade superhero cape for Whiskers. In court, Diane's facade crumbled. When confronted with the footage, she snapped, revealing her true colors. The judge ruled in Lena's favor, awarding damages and forcing the HOA to overhaul its policies. Diane's downfall was swift. Facing public outrage and legal consequences, she sold her house and vanished. Lena bought the vacant lot next door, the one Diane had once called an eyesore, and transformed it into Whiskers Garden, a peaceful park with benches, a playground, and a memorial plaque honoring therapy animals. Sophie, though scarred, grew stronger. Whiskers, now a local legend, became the neighborhood's unofficial mascot. And as for Diane, rumor had it she moved to another town, where she promptly tried to ban sidewalk chalk. Some people never learn. But in Willow Lane, the storm had passed. And for the first time in years, Lena and Sophie slept soundly, knowing justice and Whiskers had won. With Diane Holloway gone, Willow Lane exhaled. The HOA board, now led by soft-spoken retiree Mr. Thompson, repealed her draconian rules. The neighborhood block parties returned, this time with Whiskers as the guest of honor, wearing his tiny superhero cape. But Lena couldn't shake the feeling that Diane wasn't done. Then, the email started. Anonymous, untraceable, they arrived in the dead of night. You think you've won? The first one read. This isn't over. Attached was a photo of Whiskers sleeping in Sophie's lap taken through their living room window. Lena's blood turned to ice. She called Jesse, who looped in cybersecurity experts. The emails led to a fake IP address, but the message was clear. Diane was watching. Sophie, now in therapy, began drawing again. Her sketchbook filled with Whiskers as a guardian angel, shielding their home from a shadowy figure with Diane's razor-sharp bob. One evening, Lena spotted a car idling near their house, a silver sedan with tinted windows. When she approached, it sped off. That night, their porch camera caught a figure slipping something into their mailbox. A USB drive. Lena hesitated, then plugged it in. The footage showed Diane, months before the incident, bragging to a friend at a cafe. That cat's just the start. I'll make sure that family regrets moving here. It was premeditated. Jesse filed a restraining order and handed the EVY Denke to the police. Diane, now levying 2 towns over, was arrested for stalking and intimidation. At the hearing, Diane's mask finally slipped. They ruined my life, she shrieked, pointing at Lena. That cat was just an animal. The judge sentenced her to 6 months in jail and mandatory psychological evaluation. As the gavel fell, Sophie squeezed Lena's hand. Is it really over? Lena looked at Whiskers, purring in his carrier. Yes, sweetheart, it's over. A year later, Whiskers' garden blossomed into a sanctuary. Therapy animals VY sighted weekly, and Sophie, now a confident 11-year-old, volunteered as a junior handler, helping other kids with anxiety. One afternoon, as Lena watched Sophie laugh while Whiskers chased butterflies, a new neighbor approached. I heard about what happened, she said softly. Thank you for making this place kind again. Lena smiled. Some battles were worth fighting. And as the sun set over Willow Lane, Whiskers leaped onto Sophie's shoulders, his tail curling around her like a shield. They were home. 6 months after Diane's sentencing, Willow Lane had transformed. The neighborhood children played freely in Whiskers' garden, their laughter mingling with the wind chimes Lena had hung from the old oak tree. The HOA meetings now featured lemonade and compromise rather than citations and fines. Yet Lena found herself waking at 3 a.m., straining to hear sounds that weren't there, the crunch of gravel under tires, the click of a camera shutter. The therapist called it hyper-vigilance. Lena called it survival instinct. One rainy Tuesday, while organizing the community library box in Whiskers' garden, Lena discovered a book she didn't recognize, The Art of War by Sun Tzu. Tucked inside was a receipt from a coffee shop dated just last week. The name on it? D. Holloway. Jesse Morales wasn't surprised when Lena showed up at her office with the book. She's out on good behalf VY, or, Jesse confirmed, tapping her pen. But parole comes with conditions. Let's see if our dear Diane can follow them. That night, Lena's doorbell camera captured a figure in a hooded raincoat lingering near their mailbox. When Lena rushed outside, she found a single white rose, Diane's signature gardening prize, with its stem snapped in half. Meanwhile, Sophie began receiving mysterious gifts at school. A cat collar with no tag, a torn page from a veterinary manual about euthanasia. The school principal dismissed it as kids being kids, but Lena saw the pattern. Diane was circling. Lena set up a meeting with Mr. Thompson and the new HOA board. We need to amend the bylaws, she insisted. No convicted felons can hold positions of authority in this neighborhood. The vote passed unanimously. The next morning, Every house on Willow Lane received an official notice about the bylaw change. That evening, Diane's silver sedan screeched to a halt outside Lena's home. "You think you can keep me out?" Diane screamed, her parole officer struggling to restrain her. "I built this neighborhood." Lena stood her ground, Whiskers perched on her shoulder like a furry sentinel. "No, Diane. You terrorized it, and we're done being afraid." The parole violation sent Diane back to jail for the remainder of her original sentence. But the real Tory came weeks later, when the state legislature passed Whiskers' law, strengthening protections for therapy animals and limiting HOA overreach. At the signing ceremony, Sophie held Whiskers up to the microphone. The big Maine Coon purred loudly into the microphone, making the governor laugh and the cameras flash. That evening, the clip went viral with the caption, "The cat who changed the law." The Whiskers garden sign now bore a gold plaque, in honor of all who stand against bullies. Sophie, now a poised teenager, gave weekend tours to therapy animal groups. Lena served on the HOA board, the kind that focused on park maintenance and block parties. One autumn afternoon, as leaves swirled around the garden's benches, a news alert popped up on Lena's phone. Diane Holloway had been arrested again, this time for trying to ban VYC dogs from her new apartment complex. Lena shook her head, smiling as Whiskers batted at a falling leaf. Some battles ended. Some bullies never changed. But here on Willow Lane, the good guys had won. As the sun dipped below the rooftops, casting the garden in golden light, Lena whispered the words she'd waited years to truly believe. "It's over." A crisp, white envelope arrived on the first anniversary of Whiskers' law. The return address made Lena's hands tremble. Blackwood Correctional Facility. Inside, on prison-issued stationery, Diane's precise handwriting slashed across the page. "You want to read this before the media does. Meet me. Saturday, 2 p.m. Bring the cat." Lena nearly crumpled the letter. After a year of peace, why would Diane resurface now? Jesse warned it could be a trap, but curiosity gnawed at her. That Saturday, Lena found herself in the Stark VY citation room, Whiskers and his carrier at her feet. Diane entered in orange scrubs, her once perfect bob now streaked with gray. Without preamble, she slid a manila folder across the table. "Before you celebrate too hard," she said, voice hushed, "you should know who really pulled the strings." The documents revealed a shocking truth. Diane hadn't acted alone. A shadow group within the state HOA coalition had been systematically targeting therapy animals for years, seeing them as liabilities that lowered property values. They'd VY dead Diane with legal strategies, even the tranquilizer gun. Lena's stomach turned reading meeting minutes that referenced other VY Tims. Handled the Labradoodle situation in Pinecrest. Resolved parrot nuisance in Harborview. The most chilling entry? Willow Lane test case successful. Proceeding with statewide initiative. Diane's eyes gleamed. "I was their puppet. Now they're coming for you for Whiskers' law." Back home, Lena spread the documents across her kitchen table. Jesse scanned them with growing outrage. This is bigger than one bitter woman. This is organized discrimination. Their investigation uncovered a network of corrupt HOA boards, real estate developers, and even a state senator. The group's private listserv discussed maintaining neighborhood purity through pet bans and restrictive covenants. Sophie, now 13, created a digital campaign, the Pause for Justice. Overnight, families across the state shared stories of therapy animals targeted by HOAs. A veteran's PTSD VYC dog fined for excessive walking. An autistic child's rabbit confiscated for noncompliance. The media storm went national. CNN dubbed it the Quiet War on Healing. On the day of the state Senate hearing, Lena arrived with Whiskers and a specially made VYC vest and an army of supporters. Opposite them sat polished lobbyists whispering with legislators. Then Diane walked in prison orange, but neat pantsuit. The prosecutor had arranged temporary release for her testimony. Under oath, Diane detailed the conspiracy. Names were named. Checks traced. When a senator tried interrupting, Whiskers leaped onto the witness stand and sat squarely on Diane's lap. The room erupted in laughter and the VY moment broke the tension. By day's end, 3 resignations were announced. In the months that followed, the Therapy Animal Protection Act passed unanimously. A statewide audit uncovered 17 corrupt HOAs. Diane's sentence was reduced for cooperation. On the 1-year anniversary of the hearing, Lena and Sophie stood before a new bronze statue in Whiskers' garden, not just of their cat, but of all therapy animals. Diane, now out on parole, lingered at the back of the crowd. As twilight fell, she approached Lena. "For what it's worth," she murmured, "your cat makes a better hero than I ever did of VY Lane." Whiskers, as if sensing the moment, patted over and rubbed against Diane's ankle. The former tyrant froze, then slowly crouched to scratch behind his ears. Sophie snapped a photo. The next day's headline read, "The Cat Who Tamed a Monster." 1 year after the Therapy Animal Protection Act passed, Lena found herself in Washington, D.C., standing before a congressional subcommittee. Whiskers, now a certified therapy animal ambassador, sat regally in a custom harness adorned with tiny medals. Sophie, now 14, held his leash while adjusting her glasses, the same determined look in her eyes that Lena had grown to love. Across the room, news cameras flashed. Reporters scribbled notes. And in the front row, Diane Holloway sat quietly, her parole officer beside her. "Ms. Carter," the committee chair began, "your efforts in Willow Lane sparked a national conversation. How do you respond to critics who claim these protections infringe on private property rights?" Lena took a breath. Then, to everyone's surprise, she reached into her bag and placed a small, worn collar on the table, Whiskers' original collar, the one he'd been wearing the day Diane shot him with the tranquilizer dart. "Property rights don't include the right to terrorize families," Lena said. "This collar belongs to my daughter's therapy cat, who saved her after she survived at a fire that nearly took her life. If protecting him is an infringement, then I guess we're guilty." The room fell silent. Then applause erupted. That evening, as Lena and Sophie walked back to their hotel, a familiar voice called out, "Lena, wait." Diane stood under a street lamp, her hands shoved into her coat pockets. For the first time since they'd met, she looked uncertain. "I never apologized," Diane said. "Not really." Sophie tightened her grip on Whiskers' leash, but the cat, always the judge of character, padded forward and rubbed against Diane's leg. Diane exhaled, her shoulders slumping. "I was wrong. About everything." Lena studied her for a long moment. Then she nodded. "Yeah, you were. It wasn't forgiveness. Not yet. But it was a start." 5 years later, Whiskers' Garden had become a national model for inclusive communities. Sophie, now a college freshman studying advocacy, had started a nonprofit to help families fight unjust HOA policies. Diane, after completing her parole, became an unlikely consultant for therapy animal rights, her sharp mind now used for good. And Whiskers, he still ruled over Willow Lane like a furry monarch, napping in sunbeams and greeting VY ciders with a dignified purr. His original cape now hung in a shadow box in the garden's VY lion, a plaque beneath it reading, "For the cat who taught us courage comes in all forms." One evening, as Lena sat on her porch sipping tea, a new neighbor stopped by, a young woman with a Sayre VYC dog. "I just moved in," she said, scratching the golden retriever's ears. "I heard this was the safest place for us." Lena smiled. "It is." And as the sun set over Willow Lane, Whiskers stretched in his favorite spot on the porch railing, his tail flicking contentedly. The neighborhood was quiet. The battle was over. And the world, at last, was kind. If you were the one in this story, how would you react? Would you stand up and fight back, or accept the unreasonable pressure and control from the HOA? Share your thoughts in the comments below. And don't forget to subscribe, like, and share this VY Deo with more people. Your small action gives us the motivation to keep bringing you more intense and engaging stories. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you in the next VY Deo.